Hello and welcome to the F1 Time Portal, a Formula One history podcast started by two Formula One aficionados. I'm your host, Rosa.
And I'm your Ticket to Ride host, Luigi. And today we're taking you back to the 1965 season. So let's go.
Ticket to Ride.
Yeah.
A good song.
The inventions weren't so good in 65, so I went back to the music. And we're in 65, and I'm a bit of a fan of the Beatles, especially the second half of their career. And we're heading into the second half of their career.
It's going to be all Beatles songs now, isn't it?
Beatles, Stones, and in the 70s I'll introduce Led Zeppelin and David Bowie. So here we go.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So the name of this episode is Jim Clark and Lotus Return to the Top. I've been meaning to say this for a while, Rosa, but Mike Lang, that's what he called this season.
Yes.
He's not one for
he doesn't,
surprises.
No, he doesn't like to he doesn't like to build up the anticipation. He just gives you the punchline straight away.
But he also said though, for 64, he called that what did he call that? It was Mexico finale. Give me a second. He called grand finale in Mexico. So sometimes he likes to build up the tension, but then sometimes he just hands it to you on a plate.
Yeah.
So Jim Clark and Lotus return to the top. So with the new formula coming in for 66, there were very few technical developments brought in for the teams this year.
Yeah, like we did mention it in 1962 that there was a new formula come in, but I think what they did is they postponed it even further. So because remember we said that the British teams would be happy with it being postponed. So yeah, now I think this is the last year of the 1.5 litre, I think.
Yeah. So end of an era coming up, and whenever there's a change, there's always a change in the leaderboard.
Yes.
Generally.
Yes.
Yeah, because some teams get it right and some teams don't.
Yeah, so I think they're increasing the maximum capacity to 3 litres unsupercharged and 1.5 litres supercharged. But don't ask me what that means. I have no idea.
Yeah, and we've got some friends that can really explain that well if they ever get on this podcast despite technical challenges. Yes. David, we're talking to you, David, and I'm pretty sure David doesn't listen to podcasts, so he'll never hear this joke about him. But while I'm ignorant to a point about supercharging, I do know some basics. So my understanding is that supercharging adjusts the fuel air mix going into an engine, whereas, say, turbocharging makes use of the outputs coming from the engine, as in from the cylinder that pushes down the fuel air mix.
Wow.
On the technical terms, right?
You're sounding very technical right now.
But I'm not. I'm anyone who knows what they're talking about is probably laughing at me. So I used to own a Mini Cooper S, and that was supercharged, and that was fun to drive. There's less lag. Supercharging is much more in your it's short term, but it's fast.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So end of an era coming up.
So let's see how this era ends. Will Clark do what Mike Lang says? I'm damn sure.
I'm going to say yes.
So Coventry Climax were working on a new 32-valve V8 engine. Although it was fast and producing almost 215 brake horsepower, the engine was unfortunately unreliable and susceptible to blowing up or leaking oil.
That's not good.
Yeah. Doesn't help. Doesn't help when the engine doesn't finish, right?
Yeah. I think Coventry were also working on a flat 16 engine, which I think is just the way that the engine is configured, isn't it? It's the way that they're laid out. It was a flat layout. But it was never raced as the Coventry company withdrew for Formula One at the end of the year for financial reasons.
Bit sad. They had a lot of success with that engine. Yeah. So that's a big loss. So a lot of teams on the grid use their engines because they're like a customer engine, I guess. But it does introduce another big player into F1, which we won't spoil at this point in time.
I think I know who that is, but we'll keep that for the future episodes' excitement.
Yes. So Ferrari is back, and as they had a new engine, a flat 12, which was capable of producing 220 brake horsepower, I can show a little bit of technical knowledge. Flat 12 in contrast to a V12. So a V12 is like 2 6-cylinder engines bolted at an angle at normally a 45 degree or 30 degree angle. So it's a more compact but wider engine, whereas a flat 12 would be 12 cylinders, side by side, long.
Yep. Okay.
So it's a longer but less wide engine.
Wide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had their main drivers this year as Surtees and the hero of 1964, Bandini. But I did see that they have quite a few drivers drive for them this season. So, but look, none of them I don't think are going to be in the main cast of the year. I think they're all supporting cast.
Okay. And did you look up Bandini? Remember I told you he was a looker?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, maybe have a look him up now while I'm talking.
Yeah, okay. I'll have a look. I'll have a quick look.
Give him a rank out of 10.
Okay.
So Honda unveiled their new RA272 chassis powered by their 1.5 litre V12. So to me, this sounds very odd as a non-technical person because that's a very small capacity for a big engine. So normally you don't hear about a 1.5 litre V12. I wonder if that makes the car more fuel efficient or something, or very good torque or something like that. So one day a technical person will answer that, or someone will message it to us.
Oh yeah, I see. He's a very traditional Italian looking. Yeah, he's quite cute.
He's cute. Does he beat Charles Leclerc?
No,
they're both Ferrari drivers.
No,
now you're making me look up Bandini.
No.
It's Lorenzo, isn't it?
Yeah, Lorenzo. Yeah. Anyway, we digress.
This is making good podcast. Yes. People hearing me look up Bandini. He's not as good looking as I thought he'd be. Maybe I was thinking of
maybe you've looked
Musso or Baghetti.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so wrong driver. My bad. Yeah, he looks like a normal guy.
He does. He looks like just a normal
he's not the hot guy that I thought, but okay. He's got a good racing name though.
He does.
Like Bandit. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to the race of the season.
So yeah, I think Ginther moved to Honda from BRM, and he's joining American Ronnie Bucknam.
Yes, that's an interesting move, and has Ginther made a good move? We'll see, because Honda's only in its early days. So BRM stuck with their P261 from last year with a 1.5 litre V8, but the big news here is that they signed a very special fellow called Jackie Stewart alongside Graham Hill. Jackie will go on to have a big impact on the sport, both on and off the track, and we will talk much more about him for the rest of this decade and into the 70s. And I will openly admit that when I was a young fellow reading this Grand Prix series of books by Mike Lang back in my teenage years, to me, Jackie Stewart stood out as a superstar. Like a lot of people really look up to Clark, and I totally get that.
Yep.
But for some reason, I resonated more with Jackie Stewart. And I don't know why. I just really connected with the way he drove, his style. So he was my original hero of historical times.
You know, it's interesting you use the word superstar because he is credited for taking being an F1 driver and a champion from being just a sportsman to being a celebrity. Like he really pimped up that in that era about sports car driving. And he was one of the first to actually earn quite big dollars from the sport as well. Like he's the one that got into a lot of like the appearance money and sponsorship money, and he got paid to do things. So yeah, he was big. He was big in his time, and he does a lot of things, doesn't he? He's not only a driver, but he does lots and lots of things way into the 70s. And I think if you've listened to I don't know which TP did we do that. Anyway, he does a lot of things. I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah, it'll come. This is only his debut year, so let's calm down.
Yeah. I also did read that Colin Chapman offered him a drive as well alongside Jim Clark. But he turned it down because he didn't want to be directly compared with his countryman of Jim Clark. And you got to remember, Jim Clark's a massive champion to this point. He's won two championships.
One at this stage.
Yeah. So he didn't want to. He didn't want that, and so he chose to drive with Graham Hill and learn from him as his number two instead.
I think that was a very, very smart move.
That's a very shrewd move. Yeah.
Well, think about it like this. It's like imagine if you're making your Formula One debut and you could go up against, this is 2024 reference.
Yeah.
You can go in the team with Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
Or you could go against Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, or Hulkenberg.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll learn a lot from both of them.
Yeah.
But one is going to perhaps destroy your career.
And
the other one.
Yeah.
And to put also, the other thing is Jim Clark was Scottish.
Yes,
exactly. And Jackie Stewart was Scottish.
Yep.
And Jackie Stewart massively looked up to Clark.
Yes.
So maybe it's like you don't get to know your heroes. You shouldn't meet your heroes
that closely,
you know?
yeah. And he'd have to like fight him, and so it was a very shrewd decision from him.
And it even reminded me of Ayrton Senna, like when he made his Formula One debut in '84 in the Tolman car. The Tolman was not a great car. Like the previous year, they got their first points in their history.
Okay.
Like, And Senna wanted to learn in that team. He had offers to go to better teams.
Yeah, okay.
And he didn't want to go there. He wanted to start off with a lower team just to
learn.
Just to learn and not have
the scrutiny and all the media attention and the comparisons.
Yeah, but BRM was a top team though. BRM had won the 62 championship with Graham Hill. Graham Hill should have won 64 if it wasn't for our friend Bandini. So, he's not exactly joining a middle-of-the-road team.
By doing a mistake on the last corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyway, let's move on from that. Very interesting conversation. So, Brabham is back again, driving in his own team, entering the BT7 and BT11 alongside Dan Gurney and new driver Denny Holm from New Zealand. So he's got 3 drivers in the team, and as we learn, he's a very giving fellow this year, and that'll come to light. Colin Chapman's team Lotus gets the new Lotus 33 becoming more reliable this year, and they obviously stick with their gun team of Clark and Spence.
And we also have a new number 2 at Cooper with Phil Hill announcing his retirement from single-seat racing. And this allows Jochen Rindt to take his seat permanently. Because I think Jochen drove a few races last year, but only as like a temporary thing. So he's now got a full-time seat, which was Phil Hill. So, goodbye, Phil.
We can now say Hill going forward. And Hill didn't really have a long career after his championship. It just fizzled out. So a bit of a disappointment for the 61 champ. So one big change for this season is the introduction to the grid of the American Goodyear tyre manufacturer. So they ended up breaking Dunlop's monopoly by the end of the season, with a couple of teams switching over to them.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I think this is now, we can say officially, even though there's been lots of tyre manufacturers, I think Pirelli and there's a few others in there. I can't remember. Yeah, Dunlop, Goodyear. Is it Engelbert? Anyway, I think there's going to be, this is like the beginning of the tyre wars. So interesting.
Yeah.
We've got a 10-race season this year and no change to the 9, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1 point system.
Excellent. As we know, it doesn't change for like the next 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah.
But still, we should say it so people know, because it's not the 25 points we have now.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a nice long intro, but interesting. Lots of interesting things for a season that was coming to the end of a formula change. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, So we start with race 1, the South African Grand Prix, on the 1st of January. And there's a reason why I mentioned that.
Yes.
It's at the Prince George Circuit in East London, and 85 laps, 20 drivers, and a 3x2x3 grid formation. So this race was actually scheduled as the last race of 64, but the organisers advanced the date by a week. I think they mean delayed the date by a week. So it became the first race of 65.
Yeah, so we know how the Mexican Grand Prix ended, don't we? It was a championship decider, and Luigi's already made mention of what happened in that race. But it would be interesting if this was the last race of 64 and we added it on to the 64 championship. I wonder who would win it.
It would be very interesting.
Is it worth keeping a track of, Louis?
I will be, yeah.
Oh,
for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because January 1, I mean,
come on.
Yeah. So Team Lotus showed up with the 1964 Lotus 33 being the first day of the year, and the Italian team were back in their usual red and red after racing in blue and white at the end of 64.
Yeah, that's right. Enzo was very angry at the Italian Automobile Club for not approving his new mid-engine car for Le Mans. So he protested and didn't race under team colours, and he entered it under the American racing team colours. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I love Enzo.
Yeah.
I'm getting a really good appreciation for this guy.
Yeah, he had the power and the influence, and he had it early.
Yes.
Like we all know Ferrari didn't turn up to the very first Formula One race because of starting money. Exactly. So he's taught me something in life about back yourself. Back yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm. So the organisers guaranteed places for drivers of the regular teams, as well as for Frank Gardner and a newcomer to Formula One, and another spot for South African champion John Love.
That's interesting when I read that. Like, what was so special about Frank Gardner? I know he also belonged in a very new team as well, like the Wilmot team. But, that's what it said, that he was guaranteed a spot.
Yeah, well, Frank Gardner is an Australian, and this is something I'll talk to Spencer Martin about, the 66-67 Australian champion, because he would know a lot more about Frank Gardner than me, but he's a legend in Australian motor racing, and I believe he was associated with or an employee of Jack Brabham, and maybe through connections he got this race. And South Africa and Australia have a very close connection in many ways, because I think, for example, the closest city to Perth, which is on the far west side of Australia, is actually in South Africa. And a lot of South Africans move to Australia purely because it's not too far to travel for them to go back home again to see family, friends and all that. So not sure otherwise.
Yeah, we'll have to find out.
So now there are 4 spots remaining on the grid for the remaining 12 drivers, and they had a special pre-practice elimination session to sort things out.
How did they do that? Was there a time they had to beat or something?
It seems that it looks like it. 3 drivers actually failed to lap under a prescribed time, so they were eliminated from the practice session. So that's step 1.
Okay,
and they must have. I think they did the rest in the normal practice.
Yeah. Okay.
So to the race itself, Clark actually in the Lotus took pole with 1 minute 27.2, followed by Surtees in the Ferrari, who was 0.9 seconds behind, then Brabham in the Brabham, who pipped Spence in the Lotus for the remaining spot on the front row. Graham Hill in the BRM was on the second row.
So we actually have 3 world champions on the front row and 1 on the second row. We've got Clark, champion of 1963, Surtees, champion of 1964, Brabham, champion of 1959 and 1960, all on the front row, and we've got Graham Hill, champion of 1962 on the second row.
That's pretty phenomenal,
That's awesome.
Isn't it?
Like we have had some seasons start with no world champions on the grid at all.
Yeah. So talk about a fully qualified field, you know, and names that are classics to this day.
Right.
Of interest, Jackie Stewart made his Formula One debut in this race, qualifying 13th in the other BRM. You know, it makes me think, just off the top of my head, I wonder if there's a stat somewhere which adds up the most championships that are held by drivers at the time or in the future in the one race.
My gosh.
That'll be an interesting stat because, Schumacher and Hamilton, when they were together, Hamilton hadn't won his 7 at that point. This 2024, we're saying this. But this would have been a pretty ramped up year because Stewart goes on to win 3. Rindt wins 1. He's on the grid at the back somewhere.
Yeah, he is.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We know Clark wins this year and we know he'll win 68. Or giving things away.
You're actually giving everything away, Luigi. We might need to take that out of the podcast.
People are going to forget. Don't worry. Let's just move on. Forget this crazy idea of mine. Let's go on.
Maybe you should run these by me before we record this stuff.
Yeah.
And actually Brabham and Spence set the same time, but Brabham did it first. So he got the front row. So it's going to be very close. There's only like 0.3 of a second between all of them. So it's going to be a really close battle for the start and all really good people starting. So
So interesting, before we get to the start of the race, the other interest on race day was the choice of tyres, with Graham Hill extensively testing both the Dunlop and Goodyear tyres during practice. He found the Dunlops were at least 1 second faster per lap, so the BRM appeared with Dunlops.
Okay, that's not a good start for Goodyear, trying to break the monopoly, being 1 second slower per lap. That's huge.
Yeah. So, to the start of the race, the drivers were sent off on a warm-up lap, then lined up on the dummy grid, so this is normal now, before moving to grid proper. Clark made a perfect start and took an immediate lead, with his teammate Spence jumping into second place. And by the end of the first lap, the two Lotus drivers had opened up a visible lead over the rest of the field, with Brabham sitting in third. There was a bit of jostling behind Brabham though, until they settled with Surtees in fourth, Hill fifth and McLaren sixth. Oh, just about my championship idea. Do you also add in constructors championships that are won by the teams that the drivers founded? So McLaren represents a lot of championships.
Getting very complicated now, Luigi.
It is getting complicated, yeah. Surtees then moved into third, finding a way past Brabham.
Well, that Ferrari's having a good showing. I'm impressed.
Okay. Well, here's the defending champion, allegedly. Yeah. So Clark, while Clark was in complete control, for the next 48 laps, there were a number of retirements, including Gurney in the Brabham with an ignition issue, which is continuing his retirement issues. 64. Yes. Remember, he kept retiring even though he was up there all the time, like in podium positions. Bonnier and the Rob Walker team with transmission issues, and Bandini in the Ferrari with electrical troubles. So to the race, though, the people that are still driving, behind Clark and Spence, who were 1 and 2 quite easily, we had Surtees, Brabham and Hill, who were actually only a second apart, the three of them. Then on lap 43, Spence spun, which caused Surtees to start putting more pressure on the Lotus driver. So when he spun, he came back to the other guys, that little gaggle of three that I was mentioning. Yep. So as this was happening, Brabham's car started to develop a misfire due to a failing battery. And this caused him to stop for a battery replacement and dropped him all the way down the field before he rejoined the race.
Oh, that's not a great start for Brabham, but I'm more interested in what is happening with Surtees in that Ferrari.
Well, he's not winning, but let's see. Yeah. You never know. You know, we all know if you're in second place, you can win the race pretty easily. Yeah. So Surtees continued to harass Spence, who spun on the same corner as before, and it was all Surtees needed for both he and Hill to overtake Spence before the Lotus driver could recover.
Some good clean racing there and building pressure on Spence by Surtees. You'd be happy with that, Luigi, right?
Yeah, I am happy with that, because it's better than some tactics we see on track by some drivers, i.e. Bandini. Because look at Surtees. He actually pressured Spence into a spin. He didn't tap him into a spin.
Yeah, Surtees is a champion though. Bandini was in his rookie year, but you know.
Yeah. The race then became a bit of a procession, except for Brabham basically on a charge and getting back up to 8th. Remember, he had that battery issue until the final lap, which was unusual to say in Mike Lang's words. So when he says these words, it means it's
something crazy. Something crazy is about to happen.
Yeah, and here it is. The checkered flag was shown 1 lap early.
What? How can you get that wrong?
I know. It's pretty crazy. Fortunately, Clark had been given a pit signal to carry on, so he carried on racing a bit confused.
Okay.
And then he won the race by a margin of 29 seconds, with Surtees second, Hill third, and Spence fourth after a great comeback drive from his couple of spins.
And how did Stewart go? We didn't really hear anything about him during the race.
Well, he actually did pretty well. He finished 6th and earned a point on debut. So that's a really impressive start for the young Jackie Stewart.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to flag this. So we had Clark winning the race pretty easily. So if this race had been in 64, as it was one day into 1965, guess who would have won the 64 championship? Clark would have won it.
Well, you know, that's the way the cookie crumbles. That's fate, really.
I wonder if that's why.
What do you mean?
I wonder if that's why Mike Lang called this season Jim Clark and Lotus returned to the top, because he was so upset about 64.
We do think he loves Jim Clark, don't we?
Yeah, at times. At other
he's
times
a bit. He tries to hide it sometimes.
Yeah, with the tax.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so after the first race of the season, we have Jim Clark on 9 points, John Surtees on 6, and Graham Hill on 4, and Lotus on 9, Ferrari on 6, and BRM on 4 in the constructors.
Okay, so now we're up to race 2, the Monaco Grand Prix. It's in the 30th of May. So this is like nearly 6 months after the first race. It's at Monaco, at Monte Carlo, 100 laps, 10 drivers.
Really?
And the grid formation of 2x2x2.
Okay.
Why were there 10 drivers?
Oh.
Is that correct? I'm just going to
check that.
Yeah, do you want to double check while I keep going?
That, yes.
It could be a typo, but could be the case.
No, I think it's a typo.
Okay. So, once again, the organisers guaranteed a spot on the grid for the factory teams, with the other entrants needing to be fast enough during qualifying to start the race. And I know that while Rosa is double checking that it's more than 10 drivers, this is the same controversy I've mentioned before. When they allow one driver from each team, it really must cause conflict in the teams because they're having to determine who is their preferred driver. Or do they just give it to the first driver of that team? And what I mean by that is if you've got 2 cars and one qualifies third and the other one fifth, the one that's third is automatically in. The one at fifth is at risk. Not too sure.
Yeah, no, it's 16 drivers, Louis.
It was 16 drivers. Thank you for clarifying that. So Clark was absent from the race, focusing instead on trying to win the Indy 500. But Team Lotus end up withdrawing entirely from Monaco due to an agreement over starting money.
I think it was a disagreement over starting money.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Of course. Well, actually, an agreement over starting money implying an agreement to not start.
That's a very Ferrari-like call from Lotus. I think Chapman's learning from Enzo there. But, yeah, I think Monaco does this a bit, don't they, where they restrict payments to some of the starters and yeah, I think Gurney also missed the race because he was opting to give Indy a go. So Holm is making his debut for this race for the Brabham team as well.
Wow, that's a big move.
Yeah, and just a little side note, Clark does win the Indy race this year along with $125,000. I think we said last year like the prize money was very, very attractive to the Formula One teams. But was it worth missing Monaco?
Well, $125,000, it's US dollars, by the way.
Yes.
And I did a check. I did mention I'd do the check and I've finally done it. It's not often that we actually follow through with the things we say we're going to do. And it was a bit of a complicated check because the website I use is a British pound one. So I had to do a currency conversion of 65 at the same time.
Okay.
So that's actually US $1.5 million in today's money.
Yeah.
And in the 64 podcast, you mentioned that the money that they won in that Indy 500 is the equivalent money that they would earn for the F1 season.
Yes. Yeah,
in
it
64.
was. Yes.
So 1.5 million US is your full revenue for Formula One.
Yeah.
It's full on.
It is, and probably totally worth it.
What would 1.5 million get you this year in 2024? It would get you...
Well, not even a house. Not even a good house.
No, I'm talking about in Formula One terms.
In Formula One, nothing.
It might get you practice one, race one.
Not even. I don't even think it'd get you that. Maybe get you some catering for the team.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, interesting. So to this race, the first practice was wet, so the grid was not set until the following day. And it started with Stewart causing a minor sensation by actually beating Hill's time by 0.2 of a second.
Apprentice challenging the master. That must have rattled Hill a little bit, I imagine.
Yeah. And that did because when the next practice sessions came up, Hill ended up with pole position and beating Brabham by 0.3 of a second. So Hill was obviously putting this fellow back in his place. Stewart in the BRM lined up third, so he was not far off, with Bandini in the Ferrari alongside him on the second row. So a dummy grid was employed on race day, and the two PRMs got away to a great start, taking the lead. So the order was Hill in the BRM, followed by Stewart in the BRM, Bandini, Ferrari, Surtees Ferrari, Brabham in the Brabham, and McLaren in the Cooper.
That is a good start, and it's vital on this track. But what happened to Brabham? It's almost a nonsense start.
Not quite. I mean, he second to fifth.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. But
Okay.
yeah, Monaco's not the track you want to do that on, is it? Yeah. So the two BRMs started pulling away from the two Ferraris, and the order stayed the same for the next 25 laps. And remember, this is a 100-lap race. But then as Hill came out of the tunnel, he came upon a back marker. The back marker was approaching the chicane at a very slow pace, so Hill pretty much had to stand on his brakes and shoot up the escape road to avoid hitting him, as there wasn't enough room for the two cars abreast at that point in the circuit.
Now, that is good awareness from Hill. It's very good evasive action. It's Fangio-like.
Yeah, very, very quick.
Yes.
So Hill lost over half a minute, and while he got out and he had to push his own car back onto the circuit, he rejoined the race in fifth place behind Brabham.
I feel a Hill charge coming on here. This is Monaco, remember? So
Yeah, and his name is Mr. Monaco.
Mr. Monaco, yes.
Yeah. So Hill set to work. On lap 30, Stewart was now leading in the other BRM, but then he spun, and however, he joined just ahead of Hill. And let's not forget, this is his second ever Formula One race. So I think Stewart he made a mistake here. It's human error.
Yeah.
He waved his teammate through for fourth, and perhaps probably obeying team orders and maybe common sense, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's dealing with a world champion here and a guy who should have won 64 too. In the meantime, actually Clark.
Yeah.
I've got to move on at some stage,
You do,
right?
you really do.
Yeah. In the meantime, at the front, Brabham and the Brabham overtook Bandini's Ferrari.
Okay, so both Brabham and Hill are making a charge here. This is exciting.
Yeah. However, not for long for Brabham, unfortunately.
Oh.
On lap 43, he had an issue. His rev counter malfunctioned due to a loose bolt, so he had to actually guess the revs. And unfortunately, on lap 43, his engine failed and he coasted into the pits, ending his race. So this left Hill, now third, attacking the Ferraris for all he was worth. Remember, he was the former race leader, so he was really trying to make amends for what happened with that back marker. And on lap 53, he eventually passed Surtees, and now he was chasing after Bandini, and he was now on Bandini's tail.
Oh, this is interesting. The reverse of that race in Mexico, Luigi.
Yeah.
When Bandini misjudged the corner and slammed into Hill, giving Surtees a chance. Do you remember that? Do you remember that race,
Yeah,
Luigi?
vaguely. Yeah, I'm surprised you're bringing it up. Didn't we just say we weren't bringing it up? And I like how you used the word misjudgment.
Yeah, yes, I did. That's why I brought it up, just to, to reinforce the actuality of what occurred.
Okay, let's see. Lap 65, Hill actually succeeds in overtaking Bandini for the lead.
Okay, that's a pretty good race from Hill here, isn't he? Like, he's overtaking everything. And this is at Monaco.
Yeah, and Bandini, let's not forget, Bandini was ahead of Surtees, so Bandini was having a bit of a drive himself to be ahead of his team leader.
Yes.
So further down the field, Australian driver Paul Hawkins in the Lotus, I think it was a privateer, struck the barrier at the chicane. The car spun through the straw bales and went over the edge into the harbour, just as Ascari's Lancia had done 10 years before.
Wow.
Yeah, just like Ascari, he escaped with little more than shock, luckily.
Yeah. So I can't believe that happened again. What is going on at this corner? They must fix it, don't they? Like, it's not like that for long.
Yeah, it never happens again.
No.
Up to 2024.
Yeah.
So you never know. I think the 24 cars are not that off the ground that they would do this, but you never know. But a quick comment about Paul Hawkins. Unfortunately, he had a very short racing career. So we're just giving a quick reference to him because he did a memorable thing, I guess. He had a very successful sports car career, but he entered 3 Formula One races. Unfortunately, he passed away in 1969 in a race in Australia at a location called Alton Park, which actually I have a personal connection to. I did where I work now, I did a defensive driving course there. So I didn't know that Paul Hawkins had passed away there back in 69, so a very long time ago. But just a quick nod of the head to Paul Hawkins. So to the Monaco race and the lead. Surtees had now overtaken his teammate for second place and was now closing in on Graham Hill. However, Hill responded with a new fastest lap and pulled away again to take the win ahead of Bandini and Stewart.
What happened to Surtees?
Yeah, unfortunately he was not so lucky, as on the penultimate lap his Ferrari spluttered to a halt just past the finish line with no fuel.
Not the no fuel again.
This seems to be a thing, doesn't it?
It happens like there's so much drama at the end of these races. And how many times do we hear of the running out of petrol thing?
I know.
But
Bandini and Stewart went on to finish the race. Surtees was still classified as fourth because it happened on the penultimate lap.
Okay. But great race from Hill. And didn't he he got pole, fastest lap, and he won the race. So I think they call that the Grand Slam, don't they?
Yeah, you mentioned it a bit. I was thinking the Grand Slam. I thought the Grand Slam is it lead every lap?
No, it's pole, win, and fastest lap.
Oh yeah, I think it's there's another term for leading every lap. There's a different thing.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I can't remember. I thought it might be something like Ultra Grand Slam. I don't know, something like that. But still, that's very impressive. I'm not degrading.
Either way,
it's a big achievement.
Yeah, it's a marvel, isn't it?
It is a marvel. So good on him for that.
Good on him.
Yeah.
So at the end of this race, then we have Graham Hill on 13 points, Jim Clark second on 9, and along with John Surtees on 9 as well, and Bandini on 6. And in the constructors, we've got BRM on 13, Ferrari on 12, and the Lotus on 9. But we might leave it there, Louis. Take a little break. It's a bit of a long season, so we'll come back and we'll continue with 1965 next week.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye. We have a Patreon.
Yay, we're a professional podcast now. So it means a lot to us if you are able to support the F1 Time Portal podcast.
For a small monthly fee, you not only get ad-free podcast content, you will also receive special episodes that are exclusively uploaded for our Patreon financial supporters.
We promise at least 2 additional exclusive episodes each month aligned to the decade we are up to in the show.
And you will also be able to make suggestions about any special episodes you may want us to research and present. We can't promise that we can do all of them, but we will consider them.
So, if that sounds like an entertainment bargain to you, go and sign up at patreon.com/F1 Time Portal today.
If you're enjoying our podcast, please tell your friends and non-F1 friends alike.
Yeah, and don't forget to rate us 5 stars or whatever highest is available on the podcast platform that you use.
We have a range of social media handles for you to connect with fellow listeners, so look up F1 Time Portal on all the usual platforms.
Or visit us at www.f1timeportal.com or email us at f1timeportal@gmail.com.
We would like to give credit to our primary reference materials, a series of books called Grand Prix by Mike Lang.
We also use many other written and digital references, which are in our show notes.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.